Hello again, it's David Green here. I wanted to just run through how the transcriptions you're doing fits into our workflow and what happens to them once you send them back to me. So once they're returned, I put them into a folder which is called Uncorrected Proofs. And when I have some time, I go through each spreadsheet, checking against the originals and resolving any queries, any misspellings and so on. And once everything's been checked off, we give each individual a unique identifier. That means that we'll know if a John Smith who retired in 1861 is the same or different to a John Smith who retired in 1871, and that's important. Once that's been done, the check spreadsheet with the unique identifier goes into another folder which has got the master index, and then we amalgamate each of the spreadsheets together to create a single master index spreadsheet, which eventually will have all the pensioners entered, and that is what goes to the Postal Museum and will be a guide to their pension records. Now that master index is the key index that we'll use to check when we photograph each of the pension records that are currently stored in the postal archives. But that's not the only source we're going to use, because we have some parliamentary papers which identify the pensions granted and when a pension stopped being paid, usually because of death, and we're going to link those records, which Laura is helping to identify, to the handwritten indexes which you've produced. The reason why we need both is because we think that there's only a proportion of the pensioners that actually end up in the pension records in the parliamentary papers. So our basic index is what you're transcribing. The parliamentary papers adds some additional details. And this is what a parliamentary paper looks like. This is the allowances granted in the year 1869, and it gives not just the name of the person, but also their office. It gives the salary on retirement, the age on retirement, and the period of service. So we can work out just from those two sets of information how long they worked for the post office and when they first started. And then it gives us the cause of retirement, and it also gives us the pension. So we can get quite a lot of information about the individual, their role, how long they worked, how old they were when they started, how old they were when they ended, and the reason why they had to retire. And this is also an image of another parliamentary paper, this time for 1870, and it shows the allowances ceased when a pension stopped being paid. In most cases, this is because the person died. Now, this is really useful for us because if we know the name of the person, we know where they worked, we know how old they were when they started work, so we can work backwards to look at an approximate year of birth. Now we have also their year of death. In fact, we have the date of death. That will help us identify them in the death certificates, and that's a very important part of our project. And this is what a spreadsheet of those parliamentary papers looks like. Laura's been using something called OCR, optical character recognition, to create these automated spreadsheets from those parliamentary papers. Now, these all need checking, and we've got another person helping to do that. But I just thought that it would be interesting for you to see what the parliamentary papers look like once they've been transcribed using OCR. And so once we have the parliamentary papers linked to the handwritten index, we can begin to look at things like longevity after retirement. So how long did someone who retired from the post office survive? And did those who were sick survive longer or shorter periods? And how did that change over time? And did it vary by occupation? did the higher grades, for example, live longer after retirement than those who were at the bottom of the pay scale? So these parliamentary papers and the handwritten indexes are important to help us answer those kinds of questions. And with that information about death, we can begin to track people through to their death certificates much more easily. So here I've just pulled out the death certificate for someone called Abraham Frostrick. He was a postman, he was a messenger actually in Elmstead. In his death certificate, he died aged 82 in 1875, and he retired in 1861, so he survived another 14 years, but he died of senectus old age. And this is a typical example of a death certificate that we'll pull out for a subset of our total sample. And so the reason for looking at death certificates is to try and find out whether the cause of retirement, which might have been ill health, is linked to the ultimate cause of death. Because we think that what people had to retire with didn't necessarily correspond to what they died from. And we can start to investigate that relationship, linking up individuals to the death certificates. So in a nutshell, this is the work stream that you're contributing to, but the index that you're creating is really the master index for the entire project. Without it, we won't really have a good idea of how many people retired, and it'll be much more difficult to track the individual pension records when we eventually come to photograph them. So I hope this has given you a broad view of what this particular set of work that we're doing involves, and just wanted to say thank you very much for all your help with our project.